I did actually meet someone, I think, and they ended up like really in prison, like not like a stint in jail, but I became Facebook friends with them, and his girlfriend was like, "We're gonna get you out of here, baby. Like 15 years is too long."
Holy shit!
What game was this?
I didn't meet. It was Call of Duty Black Ops 1 on the Wii.
On the Wii.
That's awesome.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 53 of Podcast Reload, a general gaming podcast where we invite Sifted.net community guests from around the world onto the show to talk about video games and the games industry in all its weird ways. I'm your host, the Seoul, Japan dweller, Evan Piotrowski, and joining us today are two Sifted community guests, Matt, aka berkough.
What's going on, guys?
And Wilson, aka Wilson.
What's up, folks?
Thanks for coming on. You guys have probably both been on like 5 times, I think.
I don't know if it's that many times, but it's been a couple.
Is it not that many times?
This is number 5 for me.
Number 5? Yeah. Thanks for coming on as always.
My pleasure.
It's always nice to get returning guests. I'm happy that anyone comes on the show. It gives me something to do on a Sunday. I'm using
Same
you
here.
guys. That's what that means. All right. So let's just jump right into it. The Podcast Reload Video Game Vault. We're making a vault fit for the most noteworthy, historically important, prestigious, or just simply awesome video games of all time. So, if you could pick one game to put in a giant vault to survive an earthly cataclysm in order for future generations to play and learn from, what game would you choose? So, I'm going to start off with Matt. What game is going in the vault this week?
All right. Well, it was a long and arduous deliberation process for myself.
It should be taken seriously. Yeah,
dude, it was. Yeah, no, totally
really?
it was.
Okay,
like
good.
I sat down with like, okay, how many hours have I put in this game on Steam? How many trophies do I have on this game and on PlayStation? And I came down to my pick is going to be the Talos Principle.
Okay, I know about the game. I've seen footage of it. I've seen reviews. It seems like it's like well, you're a big fan of The Witness, right? So this seems right up your alley.
Yeah, and Myst back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of in that same vein. The thing that I like about the Talos Principle is it has 2 storylines going on. So you have the main storyline, which is you talking to this god figure and then doing these puzzles. And then there's the stuff that you uncover in the texts that you find on the computers throughout the game, and also the audio dialogue or the audio logs that you find. And so you have these like 2 parallel storylines that are running through the game, and the puzzle progression is perfect in terms of like how it ramps up the difficulty. The number of elements in the puzzles progressively gets more and more. For me, it's a phenomenal game. And for Crow Team to go between or to go from Serious Sam to Talos Principle is mind blowing.
They did Serious Sam. Wow, that's
so
that's
it's very much like what people have been saying about guerrilla games in terms of like Killzone to Horizon.
Right. And then we have.
I feel that.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I feel that same way about Crow Team. Like Serious Sam's kind of this goofy first-person shooter. And then for them to do this game with a very philosophical bent on the story, and it asks a lot of questions of the player, and to do puzzles where it's not action. You have to stop and think about what you're doing and stuff. And yeah, for me, it should have been considered for Game of the Year
Didn't it
when
come
it
out in,
came
like,
out, which I think
December or
was
something?
it was like
2015?
December of 2014 or 2015.
Yeah.
I picked it up the day that it came out, and I was so disappointed that nobody considered it. But it is what it is.
It's that time slot always is bad for
it's like why does anyone
awards and whatnot.
why does anyone release games in December? Right? They just kind of get passed by because everyone's trying to get their Game of the Year stuff out way too early now. They should be doing that stuff in January. Yeah. Oh, time's up.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I literally had a timer. All right. So that's one thing. That's one game that I've seen, and it's like, that does look really, really cool. I just never picked it up, but I mean, it's scored really high. Like, I think the people who've played it like really, really like it. So I can see it being worthy to be put in the vault. All right, Talos Principle, CIPLE, right? Okay. They should release the sequel, the Talos Vice Principle. I'd play that. I don't know what the fuck that means. All right. So Wilson, what game are you putting in the video game vault this week?
Well, I think mine is a more obvious choice, but I couldn't get away from The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time.
Yeah.
It's interesting to think about this because you sort of look at it from your perspective, and then sort of what did it do for video games as a whole? Like, what makes it worth getting put in the vault? But it was hard to separate my own experiences with the game. I don't know that it's my favorite game of all time, but for me, I started to play it when I was pretty young, and it was the first time that I had ever played a game.
Because you and I are 10 years apart, so I played that game when I was like early teens, maybe 98. No, wait a minute.
I think, it came out.
I was 9.
Yeah, it was like 98, 99.
How old were you when you played it?
My mom picked an N64 up for us at a garage
that makes
sale.
Me feel so old.
I think I was 6 or 7, so I couldn't have been older than 8 or 9 when I started it.
All right, same time. Okay.
So basically, too young to actually play it. And my cousin, actually, she's a decade older than I am, and she helped me immensely. And it took me probably 5 years to beat that game because I was too scared to play without her, and so I would wait for her to come visit. And you've got your Mario 64. That's the clinic of how to make a 3D game. And games before that, were certainly engrossing. The original Zelda was an adventure, but for me, it was the first time I'd ever played a game that felt like a real journey to me. And I love video games for a lot of different reasons, but I don't think anything will ever. The strongest love for me will always be that sense of progression and overcoming this massive task ahead of you, and going to different places and exploring this world. And many games have done it since, and arguably have done it better. But I'll never be able to play something that matched that sense of wonder that I had with that. One of
my favorite memories, or one that'll always stay with me, it is from Ocarina of Time. I went to a sleepover, my friend Mark's house, and I was at the water temple. I brought my cartridge, and I stayed up all night, and I beat the water temple by myself. It was probably I don't think I've ever gotten any smarter since I was like 10 years old. Like, that's probably the hardest. I bet you any money I couldn't do it now. I'd get lost. But being a kid, it's just I just bowled. I got lost for hours and hours and hours, and I finally ended up beating the water temple, and that's one of my favorite memories, being a kid.
Yeah, it's such a great feeling when you have something like that you're just toiling away at for hours, and especially if it is like the dead of night and it's just it's you in the game, and you finally get it. It's just, I don't know, nothing like that.
It might be nostalgia goggles for me, but Wilson, you said that other games might have done it better. I would disagree. I think Ocarina of Time is the only game that does it the best. Because when that game came out, like, when I was a kid, we had PlayStation and N64, and you had to choose one, right? Mm-hmm. I chose PlayStation. My buddy chose N64. And that was the one game that I was really jealous about. It was like, God damn it. I wish that I could play this, or have it so that I could play it. So, yeah, I don't think there's very many games that do it better than Ocarina of Time.
Yeah, maybe I just said that because I thought that it seems rational that would be the case, and that it is just nostalgia glasses for me. But certainly, there's none that I think subjectively have done.
The only thing I will say now is that, like, Z targeting back in the day was like, it was a game changer, but like they still use it for Breath of the Wild. And like when you go to Horizon Zero Dawn and you got the dodge roll and all this stuff, like because the gameplay is so good in that game, you don't need any targeting button, but yet they still use it in Breath of the Wild. And I just think like they're holding on to that Z targeting when they should just get rid of it, because I think that in Breath of the Wild that the combat is the weakest part of that game for me. But I mean, just think about that. They're still using this Z targeting mechanic that would came out in 1998. It's pretty crazy.
Well, it's what we're used to, and I mean, it was developed because the N64 controller only had a single analog stick.
That's a good point.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I remember my friend when I went to my friend David's house, and my friend Lewis, he came over, and this is the first time he saw the N64, and he was like, he was playing with the controller like a spaceship for like 10 minutes. And then my friend was like, dude, do you want to fucking play Mario 64 or what? And he's like, oh, sorry. And he's like just like playing with the controller. All right. So the current list stands as Skyrim, Metal Gear Solid, Fallout 2, Dark Souls, Ico, Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, South Park: The Stick of Truth, The Talos Principle, and Legend of Zelda: The Ocarina of Time. Moving on to what we've been playing this week. Let's try to keep it as short as possible. I say that, and yet I usually talk the longest about what I've been playing. So I'll do my damnedest to not go on about the game I've been playing. But let's start off with Matt. What have you been playing this week?
I love how you say that, because I think this is the first time that I've been on this show that I've actually been playing games that were released in the last decade.
Yeah, I thought you were going to bring like a PlayStation 1 game on that I'd never heard of. Yeah, I've actually heard of all these games, so yeah.
Right? So I've been playing Titanfall 2, Grand Kingdom, The Crew, and Rime.
It's quite the list of genres there.
Very eclectic.
Yeah, well, okay, so Titanfall 2 and The Crew I picked up on a Sony PlayStation Store sale. And I think Titanfall 2 was $20, The Crew was $10. And then I found a code online that would give me another 10 or 20% off. So Titanfall 2 and The Crew I picked up for like $27 or something of that nature. And so I was like, I have to do it. I'm really interested in Titanfall 2's single player story. The Crew was like, whatever, it's $10. Fuck it, I'm gonna buy it. Grand Kingdom and the Rime were both games that I got through PlayStation Plus, so why not download them and play them? I'm down to talk about any one of these games. Whatever you guys want to talk about.
Which game do you have the most to say about?
Well, I think the game that I have the least to say about is Grand Kingdom. Have you guys played that game at all?
Dude, I played it for like 5 minutes. I was like,
I saw it on the PS Plus list. Didn't really understand what it was and never downloaded it. So,
okay. What is this? A port of an iOS game? I was like, this looks
40. Is it $40?
You don't?
I don't know.
No, I don't think it's 40. I think it's 20 or 30. It's a tactical.
Wait, is it a PS Plus?
Well, yeah. If you don't have PS Plus, it's like 20 or 30 bucks. But
I think the art was bad, and
I like the art.
Was terrible. I didn't even get to the gameplay. I deleted it like after the two guys were talking in the beginning. And I was like,
you don't like?
No, I'm not playing this.
Do you like tactical strategy RPGs though?
No. Dude, I couldn't get past the third fight in fucking Final Fantasy Tactics.
Okay, so Grand Kingdom is not for you. But
no, I suck at those games.
It's interesting. I mean, it has a pretty decent battle system. The story is pretty much non-existent, but it does stuff differently than like Shining Force, Final Fantasy Tactics, Fire Emblem. It's the same type of game, but the way that it goes about it is very different. So yeah, well, since nobody else really cares about it, we can talk about Titanfall 2, The Crew, or Rime.
I think we got a couple minutes. Well, Titanfall 2, it seemed like you were, from what I gathered, like really surprised at the story mode.
Phenomenal game, dude. All right, so
Really?
Yeah, Titanfall 2 is it's a sci-fi action movie. It's cheesy.
Like a Netflix original.
No, it's a sci-fi original. Like the sci-fi original movies.
Oh, okay. All right.
You know, like
Right. Gotcha.
very B level, but like fucking totally enjoyable. That's Titanfall 2. It's phenomenal from start to finish. It only takes you maybe 8 hours to get through, but it's, as long as you're not taking it too serious, it's a phenomenal ride. And what really drew me to it was the platforming. So I started off playing it like it was just any other FPS, right? Like it's Call of Duty, it's Battlefield, it's whatever, right? And then it asks you to do these platforming aspects, or these platforming challenges within the campaign mode. And I was like, oh, this is really interesting. This is very different from any FPS that I've ever played. And so that's what I was like, oh my God, I love this. It asks you to do something very different than any other FPS I've ever played.
Yeah, it's definitely, like, I'm not interested in the multiplayer aspect of it, obviously, but the fact that they do have a decent sized campaign and that everyone is saying that it's good, it's definitely a game that I've been thinking about picking up on a sale.
I think it's $10 right now if you want to buy it.
Yeah, I'll have to check. Yeah, I definitely. It's a game that I do want to play, so I will get around to it at some point. I like the mobility stuff. Yeah, like you were saying, it seemed that part of it seems interesting to me. That's one reason I like Dishonored. So it's like this first person game that has it's a bit more. You're a bit more mobile than other first person games, and I like that aspect of it. There's a lot of verticality. All right.
Yeah.
Grand Kingdom and Titanfall 2. Two very similar games. All right. So, Wilson, how about you? What have you been playing this week?
I am making my way through Tokyo 42 currently, which is a game that I originally saw on Sit-It, I think. I saw just one of the initial trailers for it, and I was immediately struck by the presentation of it. And
I think everyone was.
Yeah, it's one of those games that I've never seen anything quite like it. I probably won't see anything quite like it ever again. And usually if I can say that about a game, I try to play it. And I'm the majority of the way through it. I may finish it tonight. I mean, I'm pretty close to the end. I would say ultimately the presentation is my favorite part of that game. You could argue that it's style over substance. It's basically an isometric open world shoot 'em up. I mean, it sort of functions as a twin stick shooter to an extent. They sort of
like you're really small, right? Like it's zoomed way out, so you can see like this isometric city, right?
Yeah, you're very
like
small. I actually had parts. I have a chair, and I usually play games on a couch. I had to get into my chair, sit up closer to the television because I couldn't see where my character was or what the dialogue was. It's very, very small, and it looks beautiful. I mean, it's worth that, that doing that for the effect. Mm-hmm. It's really the gameplay where it falters. It allows you to play stealthily. You can make that choice, but it isn't really a choice. I played through some of these missions, and I'm baffled that's an option that you could play through it as a ninja, as they coin it. It's very clunky, I guess, is the best way to put it. And the way that the camera works is maybe the biggest issue and why everything else sort of struggles. You adjust the camera with the L1 and R1 buttons. I'm playing on the PlayStation 4, and it moves it incrementally, maybe like 45 degrees. And so if you need to say reverse the camera, so to speak, go 180 degrees to behind you, you've got to mash the button like 4 times, which is fine, and it works. And there's actually some cool hidden things on sides of buildings, and you need to have the camera angled properly. But there are so many times when I'm in the middle of a firefight and the angle is horrible to hit who I'm trying to hit. So I suddenly start mashing the button, but because I'm under pressure and on the standard difficulty, you can't get hit. If you get hit, you die.
Okay.
So I end up hitting L1 instead of R1, and I go the wrong way, and then I have no idea what's going on. there's issues with verticality. It's hard to tell sometimes if you're above or below an enemy, depending on the angle. You can't tell if they're upstairs or you're downstairs.
It's like
and you can't hit them.
an MC Escher drawing. It's like what's up,
It
what's
is. It's
down.
a very good comparison. So the unfortunately it's kind of a game that sacrifices its substance for its style, and the soundtrack's great, the visuals are great. It's a game that I guess I'd recommend playing if you want to experience a unique game. I really don't play many games that feel like they're set in Japan or are rooted in any sort of Japanese culture, and this isn't really. It does take place in Tokyo in 2042, hence the title. They mention Amaterasu, which is interesting. That they call out that, which I thought was cool. But it's not too much rooted in any sort of Japanese mythology or culture. But it's if you're looking for something unique, it's definitely not a bad game.
Right.
If you're a fan of that type of experience, I'd say go play Hotline Miami or something, and you're going to get a relatively similar experience gameplay wise. That's way better, and this is the angriest I've gotten at any game in a while. So.
Oh, really? Okay, that might keep me away from it. I was thinking about Hotline Miami actually when you were telling me about this game for some reason. I just want to.
Yeah, it's pretty comparable. Oh, me too.
It reminds me of Hotline Miami meets Syndicate. Have you guys ever played Syndicate?
I remember that first person reboot that they did, but I think the original wasn't.
Okay. No, so the original was a DOS game, and it was same isometric view, and you control a team of operatives that you have to guide through the map. Based on the video, I haven't played Tokyo 42 yet, but based on the videos that I've seen, it looks very similar to that. Like you have to kind of guide your operative and choose when to shoot, the enemies and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it kind of sucks because I remember seeing the game like, oh wow, this looks amazing, and then I remember the reviews came out and people are kind of saying the same thing. Or like, yeah, it looks great, but the gameplay is a bit, maybe it's just lacking or a bit frustrating. So that kind of sucks.
Yeah, something's off with it. Definitely not bad. I maybe sound a little overly pejorative on it, but it's if you go in with the right expectations, you'll definitely have a good time, I think.
Okay. All right, and then finishing this off with what I've been playing, I just beat Transistor yesterday, and yet another game that is stunning visually. The art in that game is absolutely amazing.
Oh yeah.
And the soundtrack is awesome. But I didn't come away from that game liking it very much. One of my huge problems with the game, the major problem is they don't explain anything, whether that's story. There's like zero exposition, and like the menu. So in the game, like you have this sword, this transistor, and you fill like nodes with functions that do a myriad of things, and you can attach functions to functions. So like for example, there's something like it releases a bunch of bombs, spread bombs. So you can just have that as a function. You can just throw spread bombs. Or, for example, there's a move where you shoot like a laser comes out of your sword. If you attach the bombs to that, what happens is the laser will hit the enemy, and then the bombs will explode afterwards. So you can chain all these cool things together, but like the game doesn't explain to you any of that stuff. The menu system is so visually overwhelming with text. It's when you see the menu, you don't know what you're supposed to be looking at because it's just text everywhere. I'm like and so it's like I didn't really know what to do, and it just got halfway through the game, and I just felt like I wasn't playing the game right, and I was just kind of mashing on enemies, and then I just said, you know what, fuck it. Typed into Google, what is the best function loadout, and I put that together, and then I just like coasted through the rest of the game. And it's like maybe I shouldn't have done that, but the game didn't really tell me anything, like how to use this system where you can pause the game with R2 and then plan out your attack, and like a meter fills up, and some moves take a bigger chunk of your meter than others, and once the meter's full, you hit R2 again, and then Red, the protagonist, will do all the things that you did in order. And yeah, that's like the issue I have with the story is they don't tell you anything, so you start figuring stuff out like maybe 40 minutes before the game ends. And there's some text stuff that you can read on terminals to kind of fill in some of the story, but you don't know what's going on. So it's like I don't know Red as a character. I don't know her motivations. I don't know like why I'm doing this. I don't even know who the bad guy is. So why do I care about what's happening?
What about her conversations with the sword, though?
That shit's cool. Like it's the best use of the mic or the speaker on the PlayStation 4 controller, because the guy in the transistor talks through your you have the option of putting it in stereo or have him talk through the mic solely on the PlayStation 4 controller. It's actually really, really cool. Right. It's like the best use of it. He's cool. Like he's not annoying. But he doesn't fill in.
But those conversations don't like give you any insight into the character of Red.
No, you kind of figure out like, oh, like this guy kind of like he loves Red, but there's no like, oh, the Camarada, we got to get them. I was like, who is that? What are you talking?
That was a very good impression.
Like, what are you talking about? I don't know who these bad guys are. I don't know what's going on. There was one, I took a picture. The game tells you so little, and maybe someone who's listening to this is like, dude, Evan, pay attention. You know, maybe that's my fault. But I was looking at the details of a function, and it says the effect when in use. And it says the process will respawn from cells in much less time. I was like, I don't know what that means.
The cells are the squares, right?
I don't know. So I understood now, like the process are the bad guys. I didn't even know that's what they were called. So what the fuck is the process? And they don't even tell you what the process is. Like you don't walk away from that story knowing much about what happened. And I think a lot of people like that. It's like, you know, fill in the blanks for yourself, Evan. It's that kind of story. But it's like I don't care about Red. I don't know who she is. I don't know her motivations. She like lost her voice, I guess. Who's this bad guy? Like what? It wasn't enough.
So what I've gotten from this is that you don't like sci-fi.
No, I love sci-fi, but if you start putting all of your information in text, like I'm not reading all of that shit. Like in Mass Effect, I'm not reading that. I'm not going in the code. There's too much shit in there. I'm playing a video game. I'm not reading a fucking book. Like I can't.
I have to say, hearing everything that you say here, like I played this maybe about a year ago, and it sounds you've taken everything out of my mouth. Like I feel exactly the same way.
So you were confused too, right?
I was so confused. Yeah. And it when you said I don't know that I'm playing the game right, like I was going to say that it never feels. I'm going to beat it. You know, I got through the whole game, and I still, after as the credits were rolling, I said, I think I did that wrong. Like, right. I never felt like I was actually playing the game. It was almost sort of pretentious. I felt like it didn't. They
totally did it on purpose.
Know what to do.
It was a choice they made not to explain this stuff, and I just think that was the wrong choice.
I agree, and it's interesting because I always get Supergiant, Supermassive confused, but I think that's Supergiant games, and they have like they did the Bastion, and they've done Pyre. I haven't played Pyre yet, but I played Bastion and Transistor, and they have such a unique style, and I could totally tell that this was the game that they made after Bastion, and I thought that game straddled the line between this really cerebral presentation and simple gameplay really, really well, and I did like Transistor certainly. But it started to veer too far into, what the hell's going on. I mean, I cared less about. I mean, I'm definitely a gameplay before story guy, so I cared less about the story. Yeah. But I agree completely that I would get to those sort of newspaper postings or whatever that they had.
But everything was.
I would just go right by.
The thing about those things, everything was so vague. Like there wasn't even meaningful exposition in there. It's like they're using all these words, like the courtyard, the fucking. This area, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like,
it's like everything is written in prose, and
I haven't played Transistor yet, but I have played Bastion, and I feel like this is very much Greg Kasavin's style. Like,
I was about to say, I think he's the writer.
Yeah, I mean, this is very much his style of doing a game, and I appreciate that. I love the nuanced sort of way of telling the story. I like getting into, you know, the stuff that's like in the game. Like I have to read this terminal, or I have to read this newspaper or whatever to get context. Like I
Right.
enjoy that because it means that you have to engage in a level with the game beyond what it asks of you in order to get the story. Like the game itself sounds like, okay, these are the mechanics. This is what you have to do to beat it. But if you want anything more out of it, you have to yourself do that. You have to consciously make a decision to seek out the story.
Right. So you're telling me not to be lazy. I understand.
I'm not saying that you have to
No,
not be
I know
lazy.
what
I'm just saying like that's what it's asking of you. Is like you have to, if you care about the story, like you could just enjoy the game on the surface level. These are the systems and these are how they work. And if you want anything more, it asks you to invest more time in that. Like I don't see what's wrong with that.
I know. I will say though, I read all the terminals, or the ones I found, because there's some of them are slightly hidden. But even the stuff that they write is still like they're talking to you as if you know everything about the city, but yet I don't know anything. And it
Right.
just what that style of storytelling is specifically in this game. It just wasn't enough. I just think I don't mind filling in the gaps myself, and I don't need them to explain everything to me. I actually don't like when games explain too much sometimes. So I get an idea of what the
Mhm.
process is and what happened. Like I can fill in those blanks as much as possible, but like ultimately I didn't care about the person I was playing because it just didn't give me a reason to. And I fucking nailed it.
I think for me,
Sorry,
like
go ahead.
the I like just if I had to try to put my finger on what it is for me, because I also can enjoy, you know, really digging in and reading documents that aren't necessary. I think gameplay and story are really harmonious for me. And Transistor throws you in, and I immediately didn't know what I was doing from a gameplay perspective. And of course, that, you know, probably my fault. But as soon as I didn't feel like I was playing it right, I didn't want to read the extracurricular pieces of information. So I feel like it puts you on your back foot from the get go, and I never really got my
Yeah, that's
balance.
a good way to put it.
I
Yeah,
feel
it
like
makes you feel so dumb.
I feel like it's reactive to Bastion though, because like the one thing that I didn't like about Bastion was the fact that it's telling you everything throughout the entire game.
Right. So there's a
You have this narrator that's like constantly looming over you, and I couldn't finish Bastion partially because of that. Like I dig the way that the narrator's telling you this shit,
right.
but I just got tired of it. I was like, I'm done. I'm not going to play the rest of this game.
Yeah, I've actually never played Bastion.
So
Um,
I think you'd like Bastion, Evan, and I think you'd like Transistor, Matt.
right, yeah, I think
you
that's
just need
what we
to
got.
switch
all right,
around. You'd be
okay,
good to go.
sounds good to me. All right, and like I said, I went way over on my time, so I'm gonna have to figure out how to edit that down. But let's move on to the meat and potatoes of the podcast, our topics of the show. So, Matt, why don't you start us off with your topic of the show?
So my topic of the show is connectivity and multiplayer. Of the games that I've been playing, I have been playing three very different forms of multiplayer. Titanfall 2 is very much your standard traditional queue up to a match, team deathmatch style multiplayer. Grand Kingdom is very much a good example of asymmetrical multiplayer. And the crew is kind of a combination of co-op and MMO. And so I was kind of curious what we all thought of different types of multiplayer modes and what our favorite multiplayer modes were. So Wilson, what kind of multiplayer do you enjoy?
Overall, I definitely am a single player guy. When a game features a multiplayer mode, I make sure to always give it a shot because I really enjoy when games are innovative from a multiplayer perspective. I think if when it comes down to it, I really like competitive PvP style. You know, just classic team deathmatch type of experiences. Um, I really enjoy working together with people, but what scares me about that is that if I don't have a group of friends, then I'm working with strangers, and the game is only as fun as those as those people are. As much it's as fun as they want to have.
Randos.
Um, yeah, so that's always intimidating. So what's nice about PvP for me is that say Call of Duty, which is a game that I'll always go back to just for some mindless multiplayer. You're trying to kill each other, and even if you don't strategize very well, you can still be successful. And frankly, it doesn't really matter if you win or lose anyway. And so I can really just veg out and enjoy that kind of experience. But if I'm playing, say, zombies, for example, in the same game, then it becomes this 4-player co-op experience. And I think when done well, I like co-op more. I really enjoy the idea of tackling something in a game with people. That's a very cool experience. It just depends on who I'm playing with. If I'm playing with jackasses that are just griefing me the whole time, it gets old. But if I'm playing with friends that really want to conquer something together, I love doing that.
Definitely. I agree. I think multiplayer is definitely colored by the individuals that you surround yourselves with and the types of people that you play games with. Evan, you're not very much of a multiplayer guy, but you do tackle trophies, and that has a very social aspect to it. So what are your thoughts on multiplayer in general, and how do you see connectivity in multiplayer?
Okay, so I'm gonna try to be nice in this conversation, but no, I actually gave it some thought. I wasn't just gonna throw it out the window because I don't like, I don't play online, I don't play multiplayer. But there is actually a game that I did play quite a bit of, and I was actually surprised that I got so into it. Was Payday 2. I got to like level 70 with my guy in Payday 2, and I'm thinking like, well, I always talk about how I hate multiplayer. Every chance I get, I complain about it on the show if I have the chance to do so. But so I'm like, well, why did I like this game so much? And I think for me, like the perfect, if I'm going to play multiplayer, I think human co-op versus AI is like the only kind of multiplayer that I like. I'm not a very competitive person, and that's probably one reason I don't play fighting games. And with a lot of other multiplayer modes, there's so many variables that require that you need all these check boxes to tick off before you can have a good time. And so the reason I like co-op is because like versus AI is like you're not griefing each other. You have to work together if you want to succeed. So you're not going to get an asshole that's going to try to do whatever to make you have like griefers. You're not going to get that. And one thing I liked about Payday 2 is we are all working together to rob a bank and take steal as much money as possible. And then the more money you get, the more money that you get a cut, you get a share of the money, and then you can use that to buy weapons and stuff like that. And I like I like a challenge. I don't like playing like PvP.
Okay.
Because I see these videos of people playing Fortnite, and they're just like running, and they just like build like a tower in like 10 seconds. It's like, how do you beat that guy? Like there's no way I'm gonna ever get that good. So that's just seeing that type of thing just immediately turns me off to it. But yeah, I would say, human co-op working together with a group versus AI is like probably the one thing that I am interested in.
Okay. How do we feel about trophies and social profiles as being quote unquote connectivity between games? Because I feel like that, since the advent of achievements and trophies and things of that nature, it's extended the single player game to that social aspect.
Yeah, and I think one thing it also does that's similar to like there's a pair of parallels, games as services, is that it extends the life of the single player game. So for example, I recently played Shadow of the Colossus remake, and that game I beat it in under 4 hours. But I had to spend another 16 hours to get the trophy, to the platinum trophy. And so it's this extra thing in the game that you can choose to extend the time with the game or not, that gives you that opportunity to go back to a single player game that, you know, might not have, as might not be as long as what, a game like your Destiny or RIP Paragon, that you can keep going back to.
All
So
right.
I like that there's that option.
So I'm going to ask you a hard question. Do you do that because of you, or do you do that because of the fact that you know your friends will see that?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I'm just too pro sometimes, It's just hard.
So it's for your friends, right? Like you're throwing it out there to boast.
There definitely is that. Like, I would be lying to myself if I got the platinum trophy in Shadow of the Colossus and I posted it on Twitter. Why did I do that? It's like, yeah, I fucking got the platinum trophy. That's but what, like, whatever. If it's half and it's not half and half, though. There definitely is that aspect to it, right?
Right.
But there is also the aspect of, like, I love this game. I kind of want to keep playing it. All right, let's check the trophies. Oh, okay, this is like I said before, it's PP. It's got platinum potential. So I want to keep playing the game even though I beat it. So I just kind of extend the life of the game in that way. So I think there's a bit of both. But I would be lying if I said, like, yeah, if I get a platinum trophy, I might post it on Twitter. Pop my collar a bit. But I don't pop my collar, by the way. But there is a bit of that. But Wilson, like, what do you think? Because you actually have more platinum trophies than I do. You have like I have like 15 maybe. You have over 20, don't you?
Yeah, I really like trophies. It's interesting that I hide mine. So if you're to go to my profile on PSN, you can't actually see them. But I do enjoy having conversations with people, and it's fun to say, what was the hardest one that you got? Hardest platinum trophy that you've obtained. Oh, well, mine's harder, and it does kind of create this different sort of competition that's not real time necessarily, different from playing together or with one another in a game. But it's maybe multiplayer isn't even quite the right term for it, but it does foster this competition that I enjoy. Another interesting element that I find about trophies is that a lot of really hardcore achievement hunters, or it doesn't really matter if it's trophies or not, but they're trying to go for everything in a game, and they may be very, very single player minded, but the multiplayer and the single player trophies are one and the same. So in order to get, say, the platinum trophy, you're going to have to play a lot of multiplayer. Excuse me. For say The Last of Us, there are a couple of trophies in that game that require extensive multiplayer to obtain. So I find it interesting that they don't separate the two, that they combine.
They should, for sure, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, Vin has actually touched on that too.
Yeah, it's So yeah, with trophies, like, I guess bring it back to connectivity. Like, for me, I like trophies, and I guess, yeah, it is a connectivity thing. It's like it's in line with, like, competitive scores or leaderboards. I would say it's in the same vein of that type of connectivity, to say, like, what do you, it's like your certificate of how much the game you played, basically. And there's something about that I like. It's like, I'm trying to think, like, how good is your Japanese? Oh, it's good. It's like, oh no, I have a JLPT certificate that says I'm this good at it, or something like that. So it's like, how much of a game did you play? Oh, you platinumed it. It gives you a clear cut, like, oh, you really like that game, or you played it for a long time. So there's that aspect of it. That I'm not really a leaderboard person, but in terms of connectivity, yeah, I guess, yeah, that is a. Trophies are one thing that I do like, and I do like. I'll go through my friends' lists and kind of see what people have got sometimes, and kind of match up. You can compare trophies. Like, I like that connectivity. It's good. But Matt, how about yourself?
Well, I do that all the time. I look at, like, what my friends have in terms of trophies, and, like, what games they're playing, and, like, what trophies I have. And I think that extension of playing the game it's vital to sort of building the ecosystem. you know. But my personal favorite is always going to be the team deathmatch.
Okay.
So like one of the things that I love about Titanfall 2 is not only the single player story, but the attrition mode, which is basically like the team deathmatch mode. Because I come from Quake 3, Counter-Strike 1.6, like back in the day, like that. I loved playing that shit. You know, when I was growing up, Counter-Strike, we would. I had a friend in Tennessee. Him and I would connect. This was like during the summer, like when I was in high school. We would connect in the middle of the night, and we would hook up with these guys in Sweden, and we would play for those matches. And like it was a big thing to like compete against these guys in another country, right? Before that was like a big thing. So I don't know. I embrace the multiplayer and connectivity aspects of games on a broad scale. I enjoy the one-on-one. I enjoy the team-based stuff. I enjoy the asynchronous. I enjoy the leaderboards. One of the things that one of the games that I'm really big into is Geometry Wars 3. And like on my YouTube channel, I have a video where I finally bested my score in Geometry Wars 3. And it's like a huge, big deal for me to get higher in the leaderboards. I don't know. I think it's an integral part of playing games, and I think that it harkens back to that arcade mentality. You know, like when games first started, it's like if you can get a high score on an arcade machine
based,
in your neighborhood, that was a huge deal because people saw those 3 letters, right? Like your initials were embossed and like saved on that machine, and people had to best that, you know. So I don't know. One of the reasons that I even brought up the topic was because I think that it's like it's very much an integral part of like what gaming is in general. It's that social aspect, and it's proving that like you're good at this game, or I don't know. Yeah, I mean that was kind of why I wanted to bring up the topic.
Speaking to the social nature of it, I think one interesting point, you kind of talk about whether you're playing with strangers or friends, but sort of similarly but separately is whether or not you're talking to people. I find that if I'm not having conversation, that I'm not as engaged, and it doesn't have to be with friends. Back when I was younger, I met a lot of people. I used to play Call of Duty on Wii, and I would just put on the headset because it was really novel, and I'd say, "What the hell? Let's see what happens." And I met some.
Was there anyone else playing it?
Believe it or not, there were quite a few. I think on the Wii that was like, it was such a successful system that it actually sold some units for that series. But sure. I met some cool people. I did actually meet someone, I think, and they ended up like really in prison, like not like a stint in jail, but I became Facebook friends with them, and his girlfriend was like, "We're gonna get you out of here, baby. Like 15 years is too long."
Holy shit!
Maybe I didn't know. I didn't meet.
What game was this?
Call of Duty Black Ops 1 on the Wii.
On the Wii.
I talked to him for many hours, and I find that he's in prison. But like when I think back to that game, my best memories are the conversations in conjunction with the gameplay.
Yeah, that's another thing. It's just, I feel like, on one hand, I feel like I'm missing out on something, but on another hand, it's like, even if I tried it, I think I would just prove to myself that I'm not. It's just not something I'm interested in. Like so, but I don't know myself. Like I played Overwatch for 4 hours on a free weekend, and I played Human versus AI. Which of course is like that, we work together, same thing, the co-op thing versus AI. And I was like, oh, okay, I can kind of get this. And then after that, after like 2 hours, I moved into like PvP, and I was like, nope, this fucking sucks. And I just don't have the motivation to get better at that type of thing. But yeah.
It's funny because I played, so like right now this weekend, there's a free weekend with the Rainbow Six Siege.
Oh, right.
And like I'm pretty keen on Counter-Strike Global Offensive, right? CS:GO. But I played Rainbow Six Siege, and I'm not into that at all. And there was some like key moments last night when I was playing where it was intense. And even my wife was like, "Wow," because like I was the last person remaining on our team, and there was like one person remaining on the other team, and it came down to like a one-on-one duel to decide the match, you know? And she was like, that was intense. And I was like, yeah, that was intense. This is probably why people like this game. But I can't get into it. And I immediately switched over to Titanfall 2 after that. I was like, I want to pilot some mechs. I don't really care about this.
Yeah.
But
one other element I think that maybe turns me off from multiplayer a little bit is the fact that I take my time so much with games and I'm so behind on everything that I need to play. And sometimes, obviously, you can jump into a single player game whenever you want. You may be missing out on conversations outside of games and you have to avoid spoilers for certain stuff. But with multiplayer, with some games, it feels like if I jump in now, it's too late. Everybody's so good at this already. They know the mechanics. And
it's the meta.
And so it's like, oh God, I mean, is there even a point? You know, I remember I played Destiny way after the fact, and I had people that sent me friend requests and started talking to me because they were like, "Are you really level 4?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "We haven't seen a level 4 in like 6 months, man."
No, I fucking doctored. Yeah, I'm actually level 30. I'm pretending I'm level 4. Okay.
And they were like, "Can we play with you? Can we help you out?"
It's a Smurf account.
Yeah, all right. And so I realized that I was sort of in this sea of like, you know, level, I think 35, which is like the cap with that or whatever. So that can be intimidating, you know, to sort of jump into something that you feel like everybody else already has the hang of and you just don't.
Yeah, I mean, that's another reason why I can't get into multiplayer games. It's like the internet is already too good at everything. It's just like I'm not dedicating my time to I'll never be as good as like everyone else. And so that's just not fun for me.
Now, see, this is what baffles me about your position on this, Evan, because all right, like you will fucking dominate a game and get a platinum trophy. And like, no, I'm not good enough to play this with other people.
Well, but
like, no, you totally have that ability.
I have the ability,
like,
but I don't like nothing about playing a map, the same map over and over and over. None of that's appealing to me. It's like I've already played this. Oh, I got 5 kills. There's no satisfaction in any of that stuff for me. I don't. Yeah, like I said, I don't have the patience or the motivation to get good at a map or with a character in a fighting game or anything like that. All right, I guess this could go on for a really long time. Yeah,
we're beating a dead horse.
Yeah, I know. Everyone's fucking sick of it. It's like I talk about how much I hate multiplayer and also how much I like the Yakuza series. It's getting. What
about multiplayer in a Yakuza game?
Right, so let's.
Oh yeah, fucking Yakuza Online. Holy shit! Maybe there's a chance.
Oil and water will mix.
That game's coming out.
There is. There's hope for you.
There's hope for me yet. All right, we'll visit that. We'll go back to that dead horse when we can. All right, so moving on to topic 2. Wilson, what is your topic of the show?
So my topic is how should games be reviewed? And you know, this isn't really in the news or anything, but it's something that I always think about because reviews of games obviously have been around for a very long time, I guess for about as long as games have existed. But you know, a game review is a very broad term, and people review games, you know, very differently. They have different scoring systems. Some people will use stars. Some people will use digits, numerics. Some people will, you know, use 0.5 in between whole numbers. Some people will use a 100-point scale. Some people don't use scales at all. And then you have to look at who's reviewing the game. Do I trust this person's opinion? Have they reviewed, you know, games in the past? And how did their opinion stack up with the opinions that I have? You have to look at the games that are being reviewed and, you know, how you compare that to other games. So there are a lot of variables in the topic, but I guess throwing it to Matt first, what at the end of a review, do you like to see a number? Do you like to just sort of have it capped off with a nice line that sums the game up?
I need a number.
You need a number. Well, I didn't think that's
At the
what
end
you
of
were
the
going to
day,
say.
like it has to have some type of score, right? Because I have to have some type of something that I can relate to, right? So, interestingly enough, Easy Allies has recently switched their scoring system over from the stars to a 10-point system, right? And with the 0.5 in between. I have to say that my favorite scoring system is actually the sifted scoring system, and that's not just to blow smoke. I legitimately like the way that Shane set it up. Sadly, if we don't get some more patrons, we won't see any more game evals. But I think that's a good way to score games, to break it up by category, and then to assign a score to each category, and then aggregate that and give it a final score. The way that Sifted has scored games in the past is very synonymous with the way that Jim Sterling scores games. So Jim Sterling is a fan of the entire 10-point system, right? Like he has said in the past that like a 5 is a good game. Like that's an average, everyday good game, right? Like if it's a 5, it's worth playing if you're into that genre. And that's sort of the way that Shane approached it when he developed the scoring system for Sifted, was like, if it's a 5 or greater, like if you're into that genre, if you're into the people that made the game or whatever, like you're probably going to enjoy the game. And I fall very much in that same area. Like I think that we should utilize the entire 10-point system, not just the 7 to 10.
Yeah, and like we're at that point where everyone, like 7, which is considered on most scales a good game, everyone sees it as a bad game or mediocre, which is not the case. But it's the 7 has turned into mediocre,
right?
And it's not. That means good. That means it's a good game. But so yeah, I like how there are some people fighting back and trying to take back the 10-point system. That sounds so over the top, but you know what I mean. Like they're trying to utilize the full what the 10-point system was meant for, instead of this 7 to 10 system. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw a game review once, and it said you'd be better off like beating your head against a wall than playing this game. And it got like a 2.8, and the top comment was like, "So what the hell is a 2.7? Like, driving your car into a building? Like, this is literally less enjoyable than that, and it gets a 2.8." So, and some also kind of make the argument that you can get too granular, and what is a 6.8 versus a 6.9? For me, it's interestingly, I sort of when I finish a game, if someone says, "Hey, what would you give this?" I tend, and maybe it's just because I spent some years watching game trailers reviews, but I'm so used to that 100-point scale that I can just hit it's an 8.4. Why is it not an 8.3 or an 8.5? Can't really tell you. It just feels like an 8.4. But I'm in the same boat. I like to have that number to look to. With Metacritic, it's a quick way to do it. I certainly will cherry pick reviews and then read that, and you have publications, of course, that you trust more than others. But it's really nice to sort of put a period at the end of a piece and say this is the number that we give it.
Right, and I think for me, I like I don't need a point system, but if it's there, I like it, and I much prefer the 5-star system, because I think a 5-star system lets you wriggle out of controversies like everyone giving Breath of the Wild a 10 out of 10. Like a 10 out of 10 versus 5 stars just seems different to me. I think people view it as such as well, because everyone equates 10 out of 10 to perfect, which is not the case. But 5 stars just means like it's essential, or a shining example of the genre, or that type of thing. So like Giant Bomb does 0.5 star, so they do half stars like Easy Allies does, and I think that's a good way to do it.
Yeah, it's interesting that Easy Allies has switched right after I made the topic. That had nothing to do with it,
they're doing points now.
Yep, I think just 2 days ago.
Yeah, they're going back to the 10-point scale.
They're not doing. They're just doing 0.5, like I guess like Giant Bomb, but I think part of the problem that people had was that it felt like every game was getting 4 stars or greater. and they weren't able to get quite as detailed as they want.
Right,
Which is it's a valid complaint.
Right. I also
4 is
essentially,
what
and I understand there's a big swing with the star system, so I do understand that, but I just think I'm fine with that. When you start getting too granular, like for me, like a 0.6 and a 0.7, it's like I that doesn't do anything for me. Like 8.5, 9, 9.5, 10, like that gives me a better idea. And even like Game Informer, to a lesser degree, they do like 0.25, 0.5, 0.7. Like what is the difference between a 0.25 point? Like make a decision. It's either 8.5 or it's a 9. What the fuck is an 8.75? Like there's but then you can go the other way, which is like Netflix. They do the thumbs up, thumbs down thing now. And Bill Burr, comedian, great podcast, Monday Morning Podcast, he hates it as well because he's like, what the hell does that mean? There's two choices, Hangovers, thumbs down. Hitler, thumbs down. It's like those things are very different, but they're both bad. So you need a bit more than that, right? But also there are things like Kotaku or there's some YouTube channels they do like wait for a sale, buy, rent, pass, right?
Yeah, Kotaku, Eurogamer, and I think there's one other site out there that does the
right.
Here's the pros and the cons. We won't assign a score to the game, but you decide for yourself, and you have to read it. And
like you
I kind of agree with that to some extent, right? Like, right? Like I get that. Like, okay, but for me, I see a score, and if I don't understand the score, then I read the article, I read the review. If it's an 8.5 or whatever, like, why is it an 8.5? Okay, I read the review and I find out what they meant by that. Like, I don't understand the pushback against the scoring itself. It's like, if you see a score and you don't understand the score, you're going to read the review.
No, I agree.
To understand the score.
Right. And that goes a lot back into like it being relevant as to who reviewed the game, because an 8.0 from Shane Satterfield or an 8.0 from Brandon Jones is, are two very different things. And I think, on the other sort of element of reviewing games that I think is really interesting is just how many, sort of variables that you have to take into consideration. Some could argue, well, this game's free. Shouldn't you give it a 10? I don't have to pay any money to play it. So why doesn't it just get a perfect score where, because oftentimes value is brought into the equation and they say, it's worth $10, but it's not worth 30. And what I think is particularly interesting and what I think would be good for discussion is looking at long-standing franchises. I think probably the best example would be Resident Evil. That series has transformed so many times, and there have been certain sort of watershed moments where it's gone really well or really poorly. But I think sort of maybe the most seminal would be Resident Evil 6. You heard a lot of people say, this is a really good game. This is a really, really bad Resident Evil game. And it begs the question, how do you review that? Do you mention Resident Evil 1 through 5? Do you pretend that those don't exist? How do you cater to someone when you review this in saying, if you enjoy the previous Resident Evils, you're not going to like this, and it it loses merit because it's not living up to that franchise? Or can you disassociate it from that entirely and just pretend that it's zombie killer in China or rename it something like that?
I don't know, Matt. You want to tackle this first? Like how do you feel about, like, do you review a game as a single entity, or do you have to compare it to previous, or take into consideration, the series as a whole and compare it to the previous games in the series?
I think that each game should be taken as a game unto itself. Like, you're always going to review a game in the context of the greater whole, right? How does that game stack up against all the other games that I've ever played that are similar to it?
Right.
that doesn't necessarily limit it to the franchise that it's associated with or the company that released it. It just means that you're looking at the game in the context of these are all the games that I've played, and this is my experience with that game.
Right. But
Yeah, so go ahead.
no, so yeah, like bringing up especially Resident Evil 6, there was the infamous invisible walls argument between Shane Satterfield and Marcus Beer, where I think Shane Satterfield gave RE6 like an 8.5 or something, and Marcus Beer was saying like it's a shit Resident Evil game, and then Shane was arguing, but I have to review it as a single game. I can't compare it to the rest of the series. I have to review it as the game that it is, and he personally thought that it was a good action game. So it's for me, it's a bit difficult because I think it's especially with like the sixth game in the series. I think it's almost impossible to separate your feelings of a series, even if you try your hardest to review it for what it is. I just think there's something about it. If you had played other games in the series, that you are in your mind is ticking and working, comparing it to other games. So like when I played RE6, I'm like, this is a shitty Resident Evil game. It's actually a shitty game in general. It's not a good action game. So I don't know where that 8.5 came from, but whatever, to each their own. But it's like there are so many parallels with gameplay. Now, if you want to talk about RE4 versus RE1 through 3, that might be a different conversation. When you talk about 4, 5, and 6, there's so many parallels there, but it's really hard for me to separate. And I think there is a lot of good in talking about how what's good about RE6 or bad about RE6 when comparing it to RE5 or RE4, because there are people that are interested in a series. It says Resident Evil on the cover and they're going to buy it. So they are a fan of the series. It would be nice for them to know how it stacks up with the other games that they hold so dear to them. And if you say, well, oh no, it's a good action game,
Right.
I'm not going to bring up anything about it being a Resident Evil game. I think that's...
I get that, but by the same token, like, okay, I personally have never played RE4, 5, and 6.
Okay. This is a good point you're bringing up, by the way. I immediately see where this is going.
Right. But I love Resident Evil 1 and 2. Okay. So somebody coming to the table and saying, like, I have to review this game on its own, I immediately say that, yes, I agree with that analysis. You have to review that game on its own as a standalone game. Because I'm coming from the perspective of, I haven't played anything else in the series except for the first 2 games. Or the first 3 games, So to say that like you have to weigh the rest of the franchise against that one game, I don't know if that's necessarily true. Like you should have to weigh the game against itself. You should have to weigh the game against the genres in which it takes from. You should have to weigh the game in which it presents itself. Like, I don't know. That's where I'm coming from.
I get that. Actually, bringing it up that way, yeah, it's like I have no context for this. Like Runner 2, right? Great game. I didn't play any other Runner game.
Phenomenal game.
It's amazing. But if I'm reading a review and it's like, oh, no one said this in the history of ever, but Runner 2 is a shell of Bit Trip, the original Bit Trip Runner. But for me, that doesn't mean anything because I haven't played the first one, so I get that aspect of it. If you're jumping into a series halfway through, if they're talking about similarities or stacking it up to the rest of the series, that might not mean something to you. I'm not saying you always have to stack it up, but if there are parallels and there are things that I think it's worth mentioning, if it's a notable, if there's an argument there, a notable thing to bring up other games in this series, then I think it's okay. But you don't necessarily have to
All right.
compare them,
So
1-to-1.
right, I agree with that. But all right, so this is where I will defend the sifted system for scoring games 100%. Okay. Rhyme, a game that I fucking love and that my wife and I have found enjoyment out of, has scored a 4.6 on Sifted. If I were to score that same game on the same system that Sifted used to score that game, I would give it a 5.5.
Okay.
Right? So you have Sifted score of 4.6, which Shane reviewed, and you have my score of 5.5 using the exact same categories. I don't know. It's not being compared to any other games. There's no other games in the series or anything like that. It's being compared to itself.
Yeah, the eval system is interesting. You know, I saw Shane reviewed some Mario game. I don't think it was Mario Odyssey, or maybe he was just using it as an example. But someone said, well, if you review a Mario game, it's going to get a 1 or a 0 in the story category. That's going to bring the game down arbitrarily by like a point. Why would you do that? And Shane said, but what happens if a Mario game comes out with a fantastic story, and then we have to, but we gave the other one a free pass because Mario games aren't supposed to have stories. So in a way, the eval system, it doesn't necessarily compare one game to another, but it uses the way that the system is set up. It really puts everything on a fair plane.
Right. It takes every category of a game itself, right? Story, options, connectivity, graphics, sound, interaction, progression, value. How do all these things stack up, in a 10-point scale by themselves? And then how does that aggregate, to make a total score for the game? That makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think that may be the most, and again, not to, just blow smoke like you said, Matt, but it is the most sensible system. And obviously reviewing is very difficult. I mean, because maybe this is something that's always maybe just been in my head, but I feel like even when reviewing a game, you have to ask yourself, am I reviewing this based upon how much fun I'm having, or how much fun I think someone else will have? How much fun a fan of this genre will have? And that's a whole other can of worms you can go into. I guess the solution is, at least from a consumer perspective, to just read a lot of them. Find those people that that you fall in line with, and because I've watched particular games that I've been on the fence about, and I see a vast array of opinions, but I listen to one and it's dissenting for this reason, and I say I don't care. I don't value that to the same extent that you do.
Yeah, like if you read it and you pick out what is meaningful to you or that you don't care about, and then you at the end of it, or read several reviews or watch several videos, you can kind of gauge how you feel about a game after what's meaningful to you and what you're interested in, and absorb all of that information, and then you can kind of make a purchasing decision based on that type of thing, and not just the number.
I think this kind of flows into, how do we feel about influencers and like the YouTube generation and Twitch generation, and like how does that actually influence how people buy games, and does it really have an impact on overall sales?
I think it does, for better or for worse. I personally, I really like the formal review that's been, and oftentimes if I read a review and they note there's sort of this asterisk at the bottom, we're not actually done with the game yet, we're like halfway through. It's like, well, okay, but you didn't really finish the game. I really like a thorough, exploration of what the experience is, and I feel like a lot of influencers, some of which are sometimes directly sponsored by the publisher,
right,
or by the developer, can be very biased. But even if they're not, they often sort of, and I do this as a streamer, and I've gotten some games for free, or have been in that instance where I put the disclaimer up at the very beginning, hey, I didn't pay for this, just so you know. But I kind of review it off the cuff as I'm playing it, because I speak my thoughts as I'm having them. And while that can be valuable, I think it does lead to a more organic, dialogue from someone. But it's also, I think for me, a lot easier to read an articulately, meticulously thought out piece about a game. But I think the influencers are more and more so outweighing those reviews and those journalistic outlets.
Well, and another thing about influencers and that is disclosure is important, because we need all the information. We need to know about whether it is a free copy, or that they've been paid by the company to do something, or have received something. Like we can after knowing that information, we can look at that and then make our own decision about how we value their opinion on something. If you think, whatever, like they're my favorite influencer, yeah, they got to, the company X sent them all this stuff, but whatever, like I value their opinion. Or you could say, you know what, I'm going to take this with a grain of salt because I'm not sure. That's up to us to make that decision, but we need that information. And one thing that reminded me of this is years ago, kind of funny. On their podcast or their video cast, they were reviewing, I think it was Tim Geddes was reviewing Final Fantasy 15. Now, it's not a formal review. They're just kind of talking about how they feel about the game, right? Mm-hmm. Not once in that conversation did Tim Geddes disclose that he got paid to host a Final Fantasy 15 it was an announcement / release event. It was like a big press conference event that he was the host of.
Right. I watched that.
When he reviewed the game, whether it was formal or not, he didn't disclose that information. Now, he may have forgotten, but I'm sorry, you need to say that. You need to disclose it. It's up to me to decide whether it's important or not. But I couldn't believe he didn't say he was paid to host a Final Fantasy 15 presser, and he didn't even disclose that information when he was talking about the game.
But what does that really mean? Exactly.
That there is a chance, whether he believes in himself or not, that
he was influenced by Square Enix.
His reaction to the game, or his views on the game, might slightly be colored by the relationship that they had through Square Enix. So they got paid by them. They've met people. Journalists have a close relationship with.
All right, I will give you the perfect example of the ultimate gray area. Okay. So I purchased Ballistic Overkill on Steam based on my own experiences, right? I saw this game, I thought it was good, I bought it. I tweeted about that game. Ballistic Overkill then tweeted at me, and they're like, "Oh, thank you for playing the game, this and that." I had already streamed me playing the game, but the fact that they tweeted back at me was I should probably stream this game again. They didn't pay me anything. I spent my own money on the game, but the fact that they responded to me has colored my own influence on the game. And well, I'm going to play this again because they seem to like it. So
right.
I haven't made any money on the game.
Right. So before you stream the game, do you have to tell that story? You know what I mean? Just so you know,
right?
They tweeted
that's
you know
what
I mean?
saying.
So what do you do?
Yeah, I've got no money from the game. Do I have to disclose the fact that the developers tweeted at me and were like, "Thanks for sharing the game on Twitch"?
No.
Do I?
No, that is a gray area. So then you have to start making rules, right? So I would say, to keep it simple, I just think if there's an exchange of money at some point, whether that be you were paid to host a press conference, or you're showing ads for said game on your website, that's the type of stuff that should be disclosed when there's an exchange of money going on with a company, right?
Okay.
But no, that's a good point to bring up. Yeah, it's okay, you could have a list I hung out with one of the developers in the bar, but actually the first time I streamed it, I didn't meet the guy yet. So when I liked my reaction the first time was genuine, but now
where does it end? Yeah. You know what I mean?
Right.
This is just a small aside related to that, but when Drawn to Death was released, which, fairly panned across the board, I was streaming that, and I was lucky enough to become sort of the most popular streamer of that game when it released. And I was not a huge fan of it, and I was pretty candid, but I streamed it for a number of days, and one day a couple of the developers came in to the chat, and they told me that they were developers, and immediately the way that I was speaking about the game changed.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
there were enough people that, obviously it was free at the time, but there were enough people that I made the decision for somebody, definitely, as to whether or not they should get it. And the way that I was speaking about it changed because I knew I had two guys that poured their heart and soul into it, sitting right there. And if I said anything scathing, I would feel terrible. So it doesn't even necessarily have to be intentional. I involuntarily became more
Right.
judicious with my word choice as soon as I knew that two people that made the game were sitting there watching me play it.
It has nothing to do with you as a person. It has everything to do with you as being a cordial individual.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, it doesn't have anything to do with like how I feel about this game or whatever. Like, I'm playing it, I'm having fun. Like, why would I say anything bad? Like,
Oh, you're just saying he's just being nice. Yeah, he's not looking to just trash every game. And well, I mean, I don't know. You just kind of hope that.
well, that's what I'm saying. Like, so we're getting into the whole aspect of like influencers and this aspect of reviewing games. Like, if what I say influences somebody's decision to actually spend money to purchase the game, who am I to actually influence that person's decision? You know what I mean? Like, I'm just some random dude on Twitch. Like, I tweeted out the fact that I liked this game. I had fun with it. The developers tweeted back at me. That influences how I present the game in the future. Yes, I'm going to play this game again. Like, I enjoyed it the first time before they tweeted at me.
Then you just hope that whether or not someone got paid for the press conference or they're hosting, they're showing ads on their website or whatever, that at the end of the day they are going to be okay. So there's like micro biases or whatever you want to call them, just inherent in the interaction with like a publisher or a developer or anything like that. But you just kind of have to hope, or at least trust. And you can choose. There's plenty of people out there reviewing games. You can choose how you feel about one person versus another, and then absorb that information and make a purchasing decision based on that or several reviewers. But you just hope at the end of the day, regardless of those micro biases or whatever you want to call them, that they're being honest about their feelings. Okay, it's like, all right, put all that stuff aside. This is actually how I feel about the game. It's a good game, and then so you kind of have to hope that what they're saying is true, and that none of that stuff is affecting it in some sort of insidious way, or they're not being truthful about the review.
Even if it is influencing it in an insidious way, like buyer beware. You know what I mean? Like, you're making your own decision. If you spend $5 or $10 and you buy this game and you think it's fucking shit, like, it's up to you to go on Twitter, go on Facebook, go on whatever to say, no, this game is fucking garbage.
Oh, so yeah, you can play your part after the fact, right? You can,
right?
Yeah. So yeah, there is that as well. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I don't get too caught. Like, for me, like, disclosure is one of those important things. I think it's always important to, no matter, even if you don't think it's important. I think you should always disclose stuff, because then it's up to the people viewing it to make their own decision about whether they think that's important. But I just, for reviews, it's like I read a ton of reviews, and I read reviews that give games, it's like 100-point scale or 5 stars or buy, rent, pass, and I trust what I like and what I don't like enough. I know what I like, I know what I don't like, so I read 5 or 6 reviews or watch a bunch of videos, and I can kind of tell what games I'm going to like and what games I'm not. So I guess the best thing is there's a lot of people reviewing stuff out there, so you have a lot of choices, and you can come to your own conclusions after absorbing a lot of opinions about the games.
Yeah.
Do your research. There you go. That's what I meant. I probably could have said that. I should have just said do your research.
Being a libertarian, I think that, everybody should do their own research and come to their own conclusions. You have to think for yourself.
Yep. Think for yourself. All right. Let's move on to the end of the show. Podcastreload@gmail.com. Podcast_reload on Twitter. I am the stand user on sifted.net, Giant Bomb on Twitter. If you want to join us on the show, then you can reach us at one of those places, just like our guest did, and we will work from there to get you on the show. And moving on to goodbyes, Twitter handles, thank yous, etc. Any plugs? Matt, what do you got for us?
I am at berkough on Twitter. I am berkough on Twitch, the few times that I do actually stream. At berkough on Sifted. Go ahead and hit me up. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, I'm there.
Full disclosure, both Matt and I have streamed some drunk video gaming together. So obviously there's some bias there. So yeah, disclosure. All right, and Wilson, how about yourself?
I am at Wilson_Twitch on Twitter. On Twitch, I am Wilson108. Stream there 4 times a week. And it's a consistent thing. A lot of cool people there. I'd recommend coming and checking it out sometime. Currently streaming Dead Rising 4. So if you're interested in that at all, that's what's going on at the moment.
You're playing on like insane mode or something?
It's called Blackest Friday. It's like a sort of a Christmas themed game for some reason. So yeah, they actually had to patch it in because the game's too easy. So the developers had to put in a harder difficulty so that people would actually die, which is funny. But it's a fun place over there. I'd recommend checking it out if you can. Wilson on Sifted, and those are all my internet stomping grounds.
All right, that's gonna do us today, episode 53, Podcast Reload. Everyone, have a good night, and may all your dreams come true.
That's beautiful.
Hallelujah.
Bye. Key outro.